Welcome to the Only Human podcast, a platform for understanding what makes us human during a pandemic, through a transition, and after a crisis.
In this episode, we hear from Marleen Mulder about norms and the notion of normal. Marleen is an entrepreneur and anthropologist from the Netherlands. She is interested in developing talent amongst women and also driving sustainability in the world.
So the other week when I spoke to the team and they asked me if I wanted to come on this podcast, I said yes. But then Marguerite, who I spoke to, she said to me, "It's okay if you're not an anthropologist," thinking that I wasn't. So I said, "But I am an anthropologist and I graduated in 2009. Yet I hardly ever tell people this because it is not considered normal or rather weird or maybe unknown. I've had to explain what anthropology is and what you can do with it so many times that I got tired of it and actually eventually stopped mentioning it altogether. What fascinates me though is this notion of normal that is holding us back so much. The last few years, starting around my 30s, I'd say, it has become more and more important to me to free myself from this idea of normal and fitting in and really try to be myself more. While in my 20s, I was focused mostly on fitting in and being as normal as I could possibly be. If I've learned anything, if you want to make things happen in your life, if you want to achieve things, change things, you need to be you and express your views and really speak up. And don't ever apologize for not being normal with the rest. Your gift to this world is your uniqueness, so don't hold back. So, in line with being true to myself, I accepted Marguerite's invitation for this podcast. So you could say this is my anthropologist coming out and an excellent opportunity to properly study this notion of normal in society. But I'm going to do this in my unique way, meaning less theoretical and pessimistic as I've experienced a lot of the anthropology literature. And I'll add a lot of optimism and pragmatism. Are you ready? So my name is Marleen Mulder. I'm from the Netherlands, and my mission is to drive sustainability through entrepreneurship and communication. I create communication strategies for nature-loving businesses, helping them commercialize their products and services. As a female entrepreneur, I work for Future Females, a global movement that aims to increase the number and success of female entrepreneurs. And then the latest news, we just founded another company, and it's called the XGen, where we help businesses in male-dominated markets attract, retain, and grow female talent. So as I mentioned before, I studied anthropology, and this was back in 2006, and I graduated in 2009, and really, I loved it. However, I couldn't really see a career opportunity in it right away. And also, the people around me constantly reminded me that it is a silly science with no career opportunities. I switched to global environmental governance and international relations for my master's. And from there on, continued a career combining business and environmental awareness. But I must say, anthropology has stayed with me throughout. If only as an interesting story to tell at job interviews or networking events to the question, what did you study? And today, starting a new business, my background as an anthropologist is more relevant than ever. We are going to examine and change company cultures to help them become more gender diverse. And today I get to speak on an anthropology podcast. It's safe to say I've made full circle. So the question for today, what makes us human in a pandemic, through turbulence, and after a crisis? And this podcast calls on anthropologists to try and answer this and tell us what actually anthropology can teach us during this crisis. I would say now is the time for anthropology. And I want you to examine normal and what this means to you and in society. So what I've been seeing around me, and maybe you can relate to this, are a few different types of first reactions when this crisis started. The first group of people, I call them the living statues. From the moment that they learned about the crisis and the quarantine measures that were taken, they froze. They paused all their activities. They temporarily stopped their business and stopped doing everything because hoping it will be over soon. But basically, they just stopped for a moment. And then in the second group, I saw these people, and I call them the nostalgic, longing to go back, basically. I also had this other third group of people around me, and them I call the innovators. And from the moment the crisis hit, they started moving even more than they did before. So with these three types of people, I wondered which one should we consider to be normal? Perhaps all three of them are normal. To go into a little bit of theoretical background on this, I grabbed my anthropology books. I still have a lot of them, and I started looking for some keywords. For example, I tried to look for a crisis or pandemic to find what anthropology can really teach us about these things. But I was very sorry that I couldn't find anything, at least in my books, in these specific keywords. But I did find something related to this notion of normal. And the keyword actually was norms, to be specific. So there's this book, anthropology book called Small Places, Large Issues. And it is written by Thomas Hilland Erickson. And I think this was one of the first anthropology books that I read in the first year. It's an introduction to social and cultural anthropology. And what they say there, it says, every social system requires the existence of rules stating what is permitted and what is not. Such rules, whether they are stated openly or simply followed by tacit consent, are called norms. It is important to study the system of norms and sanctions in any social system because they reflect the basic values of society. So there you have it. It is, at least to say, very important to study what norms mean to you, but also what norms mean in a society. But besides we need to study it to understand societies, where do these norms come from, I wonder? And when do they become accepted as normal? And also, can they change? And one interesting article I came across was by Andrew Littlejohn. And in his article, he refers to another anthropologist, Janet Reutemann, who wrote the book Anti-Crisis in 2013. And what Littlejohn does in his article, actually the main question, the main issue that he raises in his article is the important question of whether we should want to return to our previous normal, or whether perhaps this normative order itself is deeply destructive. So this got me thinking, right? First of all, the three categories of people I just mentioned, the living statues pausing, the people longing to go back because it was also good before, and the people looking towards the future, the innovators trying to improve. But interesting to go into a little bit deeper here is, should we want to return to the previous normal, or perhaps this normative order itself is deeply destructive? So the notion of normal as a good place to go back to is incorrect. Normal is just a construct we've placed on the way things are, and it blinds us to all the things that are not right in the world. So if you build on that, you could say that this pandemic or this crisis is a huge opportunity and a wake-up call to us all. It lays bare what already is there and helps us see it with new eyes. On the one hand, and this is the most evident one, is that you start to miss all the good things in your life and appreciate them more. And then the second notion, realize all the bad things that used to be in your life that you actually don't miss anymore. And you can look at this on a very personal level, but you can also look at it on the level of society as a whole. You could say we've actually pressed pause during this crisis for a while to realize this. And I think that in itself is a beautiful thing, to have the opportunity to realize all the good things that you miss and all the not so good things that you don't miss actually, and maybe never want to go back to. We have a tendency to see the crisis as the real threat, the threat of the normal, you could say. But actually, in the article of Little John, and where he builds on the book of Reutemann called The Anti-Crisis, they argue that a crisis can actually help us to see what we have come to accept as normal. The opportunity that lies in a crisis for us to open our eyes and to deliberately choose not to go back to normal and to choose a direction that is better. To sum it up, going to the end of the story here, a crisis calls for a radical, clear view of what we have come to accept as normal. A point in history to pause and choose what to appreciate and what to let go. You could call it a crossroads. And I remember from a lot of anthropology literature, crossroads is a word that is mentioned often. It calls us to evolve and adapt to a new normal. And we are here to determine what that is. And by we, I mean anthropologists specifically. And you can determine what it means for you as an individual, for your life, your work, your relationships, the stress levels in your life, your health, but also what it means as a society. How do you want society to evolve? Anthropology is the science to examine society and what is considered normal and why. And I've chosen, and if you've chosen a career in anthropology, or you studied it, or you listen to anthropology podcast, then you of all people know that normal is just a myth. You are far too curious and a keen abstract thinker. If you wanted to be normal, you wouldn't have chosen the anthropology path in the first place. So I dare you today to examine your normal as an anthropologist and decide what it is you take with you to the new normal and what you decide to leave in the old normal. Now is the time for anthropology to examine normal and what this means in your life and in society.
If you wish to explore the topic of normality and cultural relativism further, we recommend works by Ruth Benedict and Franz Boas.
If you would like to participate in this series or ask our speakers any questions, you can reach out to us through our website www.omniology.co.za or on social media at omniology_ZA.